now I'm going to turn to Sameh from CDC, another DFI, which is quite active in infrastructure across the world, Africa and South Asia principally. Sameh, maybe you can share your experience also, maybe looking at other regions, certainly, of Africa. Some of the things that you've done that could be scaled up to increase the number of the pipeline of bankable projects. Please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Sameh Shenouda. I head infrastructure at CDC. CDC is the UK government-owned DFI with about $6 billion under management on its balance sheet. We have two mandates. One is commercial returns, and the other is development impact. And we cover two regions, Africa and South Asia. I was lucky when I joined 3.5 years ago that CDC had just changed the structure from doing only fund of funds to doing direct investments. So we had a clean sheet of paper to put the strategy on how to tackle infrastructure, especially in Africa. And we had two options. One is to back teams to develop projects, and the other is to acquire existing operating assets with cash flows and use them to develop projects. We're a small team sitting in London. We're not developers. We back developers. So we opted for the second option because we thought the biggest bottleneck in infrastructure in Africa is the early stage development phase. As my colleague here said, there's a lot of money chasing deals at financial close or after financial close. There's very little interest and very few institutions interested to take the early stage development risk. So we've done two investments, one acquisition of the largest private platform in Africa, Global Ec Africa, where we now own 70% of the company, 8 assets in 5 countries, different fuel sources, all operational, 7 of them majority owned, significant cash flows, and this bought us a number of things. It bought us the cash flows, the balance sheet, the management team, and the credibility. It's a powerful thing to go with the CDC card to an energy minister and say, we will build you a power plant. But it's even more powerful to go with the CDC card and the Global Ec CEO to an energy minister and tell him or her, we have built 8 power plants. We want to build you the 9th. So we were very keen to follow the buy and build strategy. And once we acquired Global Ec and the other investment, which is a joint venture with the Aga Khan Foundation in East Africa on their power plants, use the cash flows coming from the dividends of the operating assets to develop early stage projects. We are now we have successfully implemented our strategy on power generation. We see 2 more bottlenecks on both sides of generation, and this is where we're also focusing at this stage. On one side, transmission and distribution, and on the other side, fuel supply, gas pipelines and oil and related infrastructure. I'll move to the experience. We had a fascinating experience in India where in 2013, we invested a small amount, a minority position in an Indian renewable platform. We were dragged out. We had to exit 18 months later. And the size of the company had grown from 350 megawatts to 650 megawatts. And due to that success, we tried to do 2 other minority investments, quite significant, $300+ million. And the 2 investments failed. One of them was because of corruption, and the other was because the valuation was just too high. So we've made a decision that is quite uncommon for a DFI. We decided to start our own renewables platform with a target of 1 gigawatt, around $1 billion in the next 6 years. Now, what the government has done over the last 3 years in India is very interesting. Our biggest challenge, the 2 challenges we had was around corruption in land aggregation for renewables projects. There's a lot of issues to buy land, and there are what they call land aggregators who are extremely corrupt and would buy from the local people and then aggregate the land and sell it on to the power players. And the other issue we had was the opaque pricing. So what the government did and allowed people like us to invest is that they've built solar parks where you don't need to get the land, the government provides it. You don't need to get the building permits because the government provides it. And obviously the substation is built nearby. Now the other thing that is interesting is that the pricing has become a competitive pricing online where all the bidders would have an 8-minute window where they can price their bid lower. And in these 8 minutes, they can find ways to reduce their margins, call their EPC contractor, push their bankers down in terms of commissions, etc. And it's fascinating that the last one took 30 hours. So before every 8-minute elapses, someone else puts the price down. And it took 30 hours, and the price went down to below 4 cents per megawatt hour. So this is an experience that I thought was fascinating, and if applied in other countries in Africa or elsewhere, would be extremely interesting.
Okay, thank you for these comments, especially the case of India with prices that went down so low. I don't necessarily think that we should expect prices as low everywhere. We need more projects.
Doing business in Africa, you can't afford to be without Africa Investor.